All right, 5 Democratic lawmakers are demanding the Justice Department investigate the killing of a black man, Marquise McLaughlin, by a white gunman this month in an argument over a parking space in Florida. The shooter claimed self-defense under the state's Stand Your Ground law. It's the latest example of the controversial measure that first gained national attention in 2012, when George Zimmerman shot and killed teenager Trayvon Martin, who was unarmed and walking home in his Florida neighborhood. Zimmerman was acquitted of murder.
The shooting created a national outcry. It led to the Black Lives Matter movement and the backlash against it. A new documentary series, Rest in Power. The Trayvon Martin Story tracks the long-lasting consequences of that night.
After those 911 tapes were released,
people were outraged and they wanted to know more.
Suddenly, everybody knew who Trayvon Martin was.
Trayvon Martin.
It was like an explosion.
Thousands of Americans are demanding justice.
And the people wouldn't stop.
Tens of thousands of people will be rallying today.
It took my son being shot down to make me stand up.
This is not about a black and white thing. This is about a right and wrong thing.
We reached out to George Zimmerman for comment on the story, but did not hear back. Trayvon Martin's father, Tracy Martin, is here along with filmmakers Jenna Furst and Julia Willoughby Nason. Good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for being here.
Good morning.
Tracy, thank you so much for joining us. Why was it's been now how many years since your son was killed?
It's been 6 years.
6 years.
6 years, yes.
Why was it so important to be involved in this project?
I think the importance of this was to show the country that we need social change. There are a lot of social injustices occurring in our communities, and the problem needs to be rectified.
It's hard to believe it's been 6 years.
Yeah.
That was our #1 story for so many months, and I feel like we're still living the after effects of that story. How did you get involved in this project?
Jay-Z reached out to Jenna and I. We had just finished working on a project with him about Khalif Browder, who is a young man held in Rikers Island for 3 years without a trial, and we went from there.
This begins with Trayvon's death, but it goes much bigger than that. What were you aiming for here with this documentary?
I think the central thesis of our documentary is that Trayvon Martin's story ignited change in America, but also led to a backlash that we're currently experiencing in our politics. And we wanted to use the case to explore that backlash and understand how it's affecting our daily life now. I think you look at all the headlines and so much has changed, but so much is the same. Look at what just happened to Ving Rhames.
Right.
Look at Marquise McLaughlin. That's a stand your ground case. This is still a major issue in America, and I think we have to face it and have honest conversations about it.
And we're beginning to understand how uneven the landscape is when it comes to unarmed victims of color, right? Washington Post reports that in the past decade, more than 2/3, 70% of murder victims whose killers were never arrested, 2/3 were black.
Correct.
What does that tell you, Mr. Martin?
That the scales of justice are unbalanced, and we actually are in a place where we made a little progress with our previous administration, and so I think it's going to take the power of the people getting out voting to shift the dynamics of how African American men and women are viewed in this country.
Jenna, George Zimmerman recently was charged with stalking the private investigator that you hired, right? I mean, that's part of this story. Tell us about that.
Well, I think, there's an ongoing investigation, so I can't say too much. But what I can say is that it was alarming how unhinged this person is, and the fact that he is permitted to carry several firearms, rifles, shotguns, assault rifles, and walk around with a bulletproof vest. After it's been proven that he killed an unarmed 17-year-old young man, and also has abused several women who went to the police reporting those crimes. So what we found was extremely alarming, and I think it's not surprising that he turned on Dennis Warren and our producer Mike Gasparo and started stalking them.
Reminder, we did reach out to George Zimmerman for comment, but didn't receive an answer. Tracy, it cannot have been easy for you to relive all this. What made you really want to go through with this project?
Well, we feel as though, as parents, we felt as though the story was watered down, that was being told about Trayvon, who he truly was, and the perception that he was a thug. This was a 17-year-old unarmed child on his way from the store going home. Had nothing to do with him being a thug, and it had everything to do with racial profiling. And so we felt that as parents that we needed to tell the story of who Trayvon truly was.
Julia, this documentary also draws a direct line between Trayvon's killing and the rise of white nationalism and race-based violence in America. Plot some of that out for us.
Well, Trayvon Martin's death gave birth to Black Lives Matter. The verdict was when the hashtag was created. So we chronicled the birth of Black Lives Matter all the way to the white lash, the opposite side reaction to that. So we go from Trayvon to Trump, and we really see the connective tissue to the last 6 years and how our political landscape is really just thrown into a mass chaos today.
You talk about the political landscape. You mentioned voting. We have an election coming up in November. For people who are outraged by this, and violence that shows no sign of abating, by the way, what should they do? What should they think about November?
I think in November we think about putting people in place that are willing to listen and take action on the social justice injustices that are occurring across this country. We can't sit back and let another term go by without going out, putting people in place that will make a change.
And some of that change you want to see legislative change? Stand Your Ground is at the heart of Trayvon Martin. Marquise McLaughlin, that's also a Stand Your Ground case. I mean, tell us more about that.
Well, I think that, you know, the hope with a series like this is that it can be a teaching tool, that people can watch it, and if they're affected by it, if what they see they feel is wrong, they can use their civic duty of voting to change the story. And Stand Your Ground, it's very unfortunate that the law was passed to begin with, but it's in over 20 states across this country. Look at what's just happened to Marquise McLaughlin. Look at what happened to Trayvon Martin. If you believe that was wrong, if you believe that people should not have the right to kill because they say they are afraid, which is a very subjective term and has a lot of racial undertones, then you should hold your politicians responsible. And this November, you should vote those out of office who disagree.
Well, Trayvon Martin's life may be over, but his story goes on. Tracy Martin, Jenna Furst, and Julia Willoughby, Nason, thank you guys so much. And the documentary premieres tonight on Paramount and the network BET.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you
for a really
so much
important
for
piece of
having
work.
us.
Thank you, guys.